Sarah Martinez had always dreamed of serving her country. Growing up in a small Texas town, she watched military parades with wide eyes and promised herself that one day she would wear the uniform with pride. After 4 years of college and rigorous training, that dream finally came true when she graduated from the military academy. Her first assignment took her to Fort Braxton, a sprawling military base known for its strict discipline and traditional values. Sarah was excited but nervous. She had heard stories about the base commander, Colonel James Harrison, a man with 30 years of service who ran the facility like clockwork. He demanded perfection from every soldier under his command. Sarah's specialty was communications technology. She had scored top marks in her training and was eager to prove herself in her new role. The base housed over 2,000 soldiers, and she would be responsible for maintaining critical communication systems that kept everyone connected during missions and daily operations. On her first day, Sarah reported to the communications center at 600 hours sharp. The building was massive, filled with sophisticated equipment that hummed with constant activity. Her supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez, showed her around and explained her duties. Sarah listened carefully, taking mental notes of every detail. The work was challenging but rewarding. Sarah quickly established herself as a reliable and skilled technician. Her colleagues respected her knowledge and willingness to help during difficult situations. She volunteered for extra shifts and never complained about the demanding schedule. However, Sarah carried a secret that she kept hidden beneath her uniform. Years ago, during a difficult time in her life, she had gotten a tattoo on her shoulder. It was not just any tattoo. It was a memorial piece dedicated to her younger brother who had died in a car accident when Sarah was in college. The tattoo featured his name, dates of his birth and death, and a pair of angel wings. Below the wings, in elegant script, were the words, "Forever in my heart." The tattoo meant everything to Sarah. It reminded her of her brother's courage and the promise she had made at his funeral to live her life with purpose. Her brother had always supported her military dreams, even when others doubted whether she was strong enough for military life. Getting the tattoo had been her way of keeping his memory close to her heart. Sarah knew that visible tattoos were strictly regulated in the military. While small, non-offensive tattoos were generally allowed, the location and size of hers might cause problems with certain commanders. She had managed to keep it hidden during her training by carefully choosing her clothing and being strategic about when and where she changed uniforms. At Fort Braxton, Sarah continued this careful routine. She always arrived at the base already dressed in her uniform and found private places to change when necessary. Her roommate in the barracks had seen the tattoo and understood its significance, promising to keep Sarah's secret. For several months, everything went smoothly. Sarah excelled in her duties, earned commendations from her supervisors, and began to feel truly at home on the base. She made friends with other soldiers and enjoyed the sense of purpose that came with serving her country. The rigid schedule and demanding work suited her personality perfectly. She particularly enjoyed working on complex technical problems that required creative solutions. When communication systems failed during training exercises, Sarah was often the one who figured out how to get everything working again. Her reputation as a problem solver grew throughout the base. Sarah also volunteered for community service projects in the nearby town. She helped at the local veterans center and participated in charity drives organized by the base. These activities made her feel connected to something larger than herself and honored the memory of her brother, who had always believed in helping others. During off-duty hours, Sarah spent time in the base library, reading technical manuals and studying for advancement exams. She was determined to climb the ranks and eventually become an officer. Her long-term goal was to specialize in cybersecurity and protect military communications from enemy threats. As winter approached, Sarah felt confident about her place at Fort Braxton. She had successfully navigated the challenges of military life and proven herself as a valuable member of the team. Her secret remained safe, and she began to think that maybe she had worried about nothing. The tattoo was just a small part of who she was, and as long as she kept it hidden, there would be no problems. But Sarah had no way of knowing that events were already in motion that would soon change everything. Her careful routine and hidden secret were about to be exposed in the most unexpected and dramatic way possible. The trouble began on a cold Monday morning in November, when Sarah received an urgent message to report to the main communications bunker. A critical system had failed during the night, and the base's connection to military headquarters had been completely severed. This was not just an inconvenience. It was a serious security issue that needed immediate attention. Sarah grabbed her equipment bag and rushed to the bunker, which was located in the most secure area of the base. The facility was underground and required special clearance to enter. As she descended the concrete steps, she could hear the worried voices of senior officers discussing the situation. Inside the bunker, chaos reigned. Multiple computer screens displayed error messages, and red warning lights flashed continuously. The main communication array, which connected Fort Braxton to dozens of other military installations, had suffered a complete breakdown. Colonel Harrison himself was present, pacing back and forth while demanding updates from the technical staff. Sarah immediately got to work, running diagnostic tests and checking every component of the complex system. The problem was more serious than anyone had initially realized. Not only had the primary communication array failed, but the backup systems had also malfunctioned. This left the base completely isolated from the outside military network. As hours passed, Sarah worked frantically to identify the source of the problem. She crawled through narrow spaces between equipment racks, testing circuits and replacing damaged components. Her uniform became dirty and torn as she squeezed into tight spaces that larger soldiers could not access. The pressure was enormous. Every minute without communication put the base at risk. Important messages from headquarters could not be received, and critical intelligence updates were being missed. Colonel Harrison's stress level increased as the day wore on, and he began questioning every decision made by the technical team. Sarah finally discovered the root cause of the failure. A sophisticated piece of equipment called the primary router had been damaged by a power surge during a thunderstorm the previous night. The surge had also damaged several backup components, creating a cascade of failures throughout the system. However, fixing the problem would require Sarah to work in an extremely confined space for several hours. The damaged router was located in a crawl space beneath the main equipment room, accessible only through a narrow opening barely wide enough for one person. The space was hot, cramped, and filled with sharp edges that could easily tear clothing. Sarah explained the situation to her supervisor, Sergeant Rodriguez, who immediately understood the challenge. The repair work would be delicate and time-consuming, requiring Sarah to remain in the cramped space for an extended period. There was no way to complete the job while wearing her full uniform. The fabric would get caught on equipment and prevent her from reaching the necessary components. Sergeant Rodriguez approached Colonel Harrison with the dilemma. The colonel's face grew stern as he considered the options. He was a man who believed in protocol and proper procedures above all else. The idea of allowing a soldier to remove her uniform, even for legitimate technical reasons, went against everything he stood for. However, the communication failure was becoming critical. Reports were coming in that headquarters was trying to reach Fort Braxton with urgent orders regarding a potential security threat in the region. Without communication capabilities, the base was essentially blind and deaf to the outside world. After much deliberation, Colonel Harrison made a difficult decision. He authorized Sarah to remove her outer uniform jacket and work in her standard military undershirt. This would give her the flexibility needed to complete the repairs while maintaining some level of military decorum. Sarah felt relieved, but also nervous as she prepared for the challenging repair work. She had never been in such a high-pressure situation, and the weight of responsibility was overwhelming. The entire base was counting on her technical skills to restore their connection to the outside world. As she began removing her uniform jacket, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts about the delicate work ahead. She would need to replace the damaged router, rewire several connections, and recalibrate the entire system. One small mistake could cause even more damage and extend the communication blackout indefinitely. What Sarah did not realize was that removing her jacket would expose not just her arms for better mobility, but also reveal the memorial tattoo that she had kept hidden for so long. In the stress of the moment and the urgency of the situation, she had completely forgotten about her secret. The cramped workspace and the complexity of the repair job would soon put Sarah in a position she had never imagined possible. Her carefully guarded secret was about to be exposed in front of the most demanding and traditional commander she had ever encountered. Sarah squeezed into the narrow crawl space beneath the equipment room, her flashlight cutting through the darkness as she located the damaged router. The space was even more cramped than she had expected, with barely enough room to move her arms. Metal edges pressed against her shoulders, and the heat from the surrounding equipment made breathing difficult. Working in the confined space proved to be more challenging than anyone had anticipated. As Sarah tried to disconnect the damaged router, she realized that her military undershirt was still too bulky for the delicate work required. The fabric kept getting caught on protruding wires and sharp metal brackets, preventing her from reaching the critical connection points. After struggling for nearly an hour with minimal progress, Sarah called out to Sergeant Rodriguez. Her voice echoed strangely in the cramped space as she explained that the undershirt was hindering her ability to complete the repairs. The situation was becoming desperate. Communication had been down for almost 8 hours, and there were rumors that headquarters was considering sending an emergency team to investigate the silence from Fort Braxton. Sergeant Rodriguez consulted with Colonel Harrison about the new complication. The colonel's jaw tightened as he processed the information. He understood the technical necessities, but the idea of allowing a female soldier to work in minimal clothing went against every protocol he had ever enforced. However, the communication breakdown was now classified as a critical emergency that could compromise national security. After what seemed like an eternity of deliberation, Colonel Harrison made another unprecedented decision. He ordered that all non-essential personnel be cleared from the communications bunker, leaving only the minimum crew necessary to monitor Sarah's progress. He then authorized her to remove her undershirt and work in her standard military-issued undergarments, which would provide the mobility needed while maintaining basic modesty. The colonel established strict ground rules for the situation. Sarah would work alone in the crawl space, with only her voice providing updates on her progress. No one would approach the workspace unless absolutely necessary, and all personnel were instructed to maintain professional conduct at all times. Security cameras in the area were temporarily redirected to protect Sarah's privacy. During the emergency repair work, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as she prepared to continue the repairs. Under these unusual circumstances, she had never been in such an exposed position during her military service, but she understood that the mission had to come first. The weight of responsibility was enormous. Hundreds of soldiers were depending on her technical expertise to restore their connection to the outside world. As she carefully removed her undershirt in the cramped space, Sarah's mind was focused entirely on the complex repair work ahead. She had mentally rehearsed every step of the procedure and was determined to complete the job as quickly as possible. The damaged router would need to be completely replaced, and several backup systems would require recalibration. However, in her intense concentration on the technical aspects of the mission, Sarah had completely forgotten about the memorial tattoo on her shoulder. The artwork that honored her brother's memory was now visible for the first time since her arrival at Fort Braxton. The angel wings and heartfelt inscription were exposed, but Sarah was too focused on her work to remember their presence. The repair work progressed slowly but steadily. Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision as she disconnected damaged components and installed replacement parts. The confined space made every movement deliberate and careful, as one wrong move could damage other critical systems. As the hours passed, word spread throughout the base about the emergency repair efforts. Soldiers gathered in nearby areas, anxiously waiting for updates about when communication would be restored. Many of them had family members they needed to contact, and the isolation from the outside world was causing increasing stress among the troops. Colonel Harrison remained in the communications bunker, monitoring Sarah's progress and coordinating with other officers about contingency plans. His usual stern demeanor showed signs of strain as the pressure mounted. He had built his career on maintaining perfect order and protocol, but this emergency situation was forcing him to make decisions that challenged everything he believed about military discipline. Unknown to Sarah, her exceptional technical skills and dedication to the mission were earning her respect from officers throughout the base. Even Colonel Harrison, despite his concerns about protocol, was beginning to recognize that her expertise was exactly what the situation required. The repair work was nearing completion when an unexpected complication arose. One of the replacement components was not responding properly, and Sarah realized she would need to adjust her position to access additional connection points. This movement would require her to back out of the crawlspace partially, exposing her to anyone present in the equipment room. Sarah called out to inform Sergeant Rodriguez about the situation, unaware that her carefully hidden secret was about to be revealed to the most traditional and demanding commander she had ever encountered. The moment Sarah emerged from the crawlspace to adjust her position, the memorial tattoo on her shoulder became visible to everyone in the communications bunker. The angel wings seemed to shimmer under the harsh fluorescent lights, and the inscription honoring her brother's memory was clearly readable to anyone who looked in her direction. Sergeant Rodriguez noticed the tattoo first, his eyes widening in surprise. He had worked with Sarah for months and had no idea she had any body art. Several junior technicians also caught sight of the artwork, and a murmur of whispers began to spread through the room. In the military culture of Fort Braxton, visible tattoos were a serious matter that could result in disciplinary action. Colonel Harrison was reviewing technical reports when one of his aides quietly drew his attention to the situation. The colonel looked up from his paperwork and immediately spotted the tattoo. His face hardened into an expression of stern disapproval as he processed what he was seeing. Throughout his 30-year career, he had maintained strict standards regarding military appearance and protocol. The colonel's first instinct was to order Sarah to stop work immediately and report for disciplinary action. Unauthorized tattoos, especially ones that violated military appearance standards, were grounds for serious consequences. He had built his reputation on enforcing regulations without exception. Regardless of circumstances or personal situations, however, the communication emergency created an impossible dilemma for Colonel Harrison. Sarah was the only technician on base with the specialized knowledge needed to complete the complex repairs. Stopping her work now would mean extending the communication blackout indefinitely, potentially compromising national security and putting the entire base at risk. As Sarah continued working, completely unaware of the stir her tattoo had caused, Colonel Harrison struggled with the most difficult decision of his military career. His rigid adherence to protocol demanded immediate action against the regulation violation, yet his responsibility as base commander required him to prioritize the mission and the safety of his soldiers. The tension in the communications bunker became palpable as word of the tattoo spread among the personnel present. Some soldiers whispered among themselves, speculating about what kind of disciplinary action Sarah might face. Others focused on the critical nature of her repair work and hoped the colonel would show understanding given the emergency circumstances. Sergeant Rodriguez found himself in an equally difficult position. As Sarah's direct supervisor, he was responsible for knowing about any regulation violations among his team members. The fact that he had been unaware of the tattoo could reflect poorly on his leadership and attention to detail. He watched nervously as Colonel Harrison's expression grew increasingly stern. Sarah remained focused on her work, making steady progress on the final phase of the repairs. She had successfully replaced the damaged router and was now recalibrating the backup systems to ensure stable operation. Her technical expertise was evident in the methodical way she approached each step of the complex procedure. The irony of the situation was not lost on some of the observers. Here was a soldier who had volunteered for the most challenging and critical repair job on the base, working in extremely difficult conditions to restore communication capabilities that everyone desperately needed. Yet she was also in violation of military appearance standards that could end her career. Colonel Harrison moved closer to observe Sarah's work, his mind churning with conflicting thoughts. He could see the quality of her technical skills and the dedication she was showing to the mission. At the same time, he could clearly see the tattoo that represented a clear violation of regulations he had spent decades enforcing. As the colonel examined the tattoo more closely, he began to make out the details of the artwork. The angel wings were expertly crafted, and the inscription below them suggested this was more than just decorative body art. The dates and name indicated this was some kind of memorial piece, though he could not yet read all the details from his current position. The communication systems began showing signs of improvement as Sarah's repairs took effect. Status lights that had been red for hours started turning green, and the constant error alarms finally fell silent. The base's connection to the outside world was slowly being restored through Sarah's expert work. But even as success appeared within reach, the situation in the communications bunker remained extremely tense. Colonel Harrison had to make a decision about how to handle the tattoo violation, and that decision would have profound consequences for Sarah's military career and future service at Fort Braxton. The colonel's reputation for strict discipline was well known throughout the base, and everyone present understood that he rarely showed leniency for regulation violations. Sarah continued working, unaware that her hidden secret had been exposed, and that her commanding officer was now faced with an unprecedented dilemma that challenged everything he believed about military order and protocol. Colonel Harrison stepped closer to get a better view of the tattoo, his military bearing rigid with authority. As base commander, he needed to assess the full extent of the regulation violation before deciding on appropriate disciplinary action. What he saw, however, made him pause in a way that surprised everyone present, including himself. The tattoo was not the crude or inappropriate artwork he had expected. Instead, it was a beautifully crafted memorial piece featuring delicate angel wings, spread protectively over a heartfelt inscription. As the colonel read the text more carefully, he could make out a name, Michael Martinez, along with birth and death dates that showed the person had died at just 19 years old. Below the dates, in elegant script lettering, were the words, "Forever in my heart," and "Until we meet again." The artwork also included a small military dog tag symbol, suggesting that the person being honored had some connection to military service. The overall design was tasteful and clearly held deep personal significance for Sarah. Colonel Harrison found himself in uncharted territory. In 3 decades of military service, he had encountered numerous tattoo violations, but they had typically involved inappropriate symbols, gang affiliations, or simply decorative artwork that violated appearance standards. He had never encountered a memorial tattoo that so clearly honored a fallen family member. The colonel's mind began to race with questions about the person memorialized in the tattoo. Was Michael Martinez a fellow service member who had died in combat? A family member who had served in the military? The presence of the dog tag symbol suggested some connection to military service, which added another layer of complexity to the situation. As Sarah continued her repair work, completely absorbed in the technical challenges, Colonel Harrison found himself remembering his own experiences with loss during his military career. He had lost friends and colleagues in various conflicts and training accidents over the years. The pain of such losses never truly disappeared, and he understood the need to honor and remember those who had been taken too soon. The communication systems continued to improve as Sarah's expertise brought the complex network back online. Status indicators throughout the bunker showed steady progress, and the first successful connection test with headquarters had been completed. The base would soon be fully reconnected to the outside military network. Ending the critical communication blackout, however, the success of the repair mission did nothing to resolve the immediate dilemma facing Colonel Harrison. Military regulations regarding tattoos were clear and specific, regardless of the personal meaning behind the artwork. His responsibility as base commander was to enforce these regulations consistently and without favoritism. Yet something about this situation felt different to the colonel. Sarah had volunteered for the most challenging assignment on the base, worked tirelessly under extremely difficult conditions, and was successfully completing a mission that everyone else had deemed impossible. Her dedication to duty and technical excellence were exactly the qualities the military sought to develop in its personnel. Sergeant Rodriguez watched nervously as Colonel Harrison continued to study the tattoo. The sergeant had worked under the colonel for several years and knew his reputation for strict discipline. There had been cases where soldiers received significant punishments for much minor violations of military appearance standards. The other personnel in the communications bunker remained silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. Everyone understood that Colonel Harrison's decision would set a precedent for how similar situations might be handled in the future. The colonel's reputation for consistency and fairness was on the line, as was Sarah's military career. As Sarah made the final adjustments to the communication systems, the first messages from headquarters began coming through clearly. The communication blackout was officially over, and Fort Braxton was once again connected to the broader military network. Sarah's technical expertise had saved the day, but her future remained uncertain. Colonel Harrison realized that he needed more information before making his final decision. The memorial nature of the tattoo suggested there might be circumstances that warranted consideration. but he needed to understand the full story behind the artwork. Military justice required both adherence to regulations and consideration of individual circumstances. The colonel decided to wait until Sarah completed her work and could provide a full explanation of the tattoo's significance. This would give him time to consider all aspects of the situation and make a decision that served both military discipline and justice. The moment of truth was approaching, and everyone in the communications bunker could feel the tension building toward an unprecedented confrontation. Sarah completed the final calibration tests and announced that the communication systems were fully operational. As she began to emerge from the cramped workspace, she finally became aware of the unusual silence in the communications bunker. The normal buzz of conversation and activity had been replaced by intention she could not understand. It was only when Sarah turned around and saw Colonel Harrison standing directly behind her, his eyes fixed on her shoulder, that she realized her tattoo was visible. Her heart sank as the full magnitude of her situation became clear. The secret she had guarded so carefully for months had been exposed at the worst possible moment, in front of the most demanding commander on the base. Sarah quickly reached for her undershirt, her face flushing with embarrassment and fear. She had heard stories about Colonel Harrison's strict enforcement of military regulations, and she knew that tattoo violations could result in serious disciplinary action, including possible discharge from the service. All her dreams of a military career seemed to be crumbling in an instant. Colonel Harrison raised his hand to stop Sarah from covering the tattoo. His voice was firm but not angry as he spoke. "Soldier, before you get dressed, I need you to explain the meaning of that tattoo. This is not a disciplinary inquiry yet, but I require a full understanding of the situation before making any decisions." Sarah stood at attention, her military training taking over despite her emotional turmoil. She looked directly at Colonel Harrison and began to explain the story behind the memorial tattoo. Her voice was steady, though those present could hear the underlying emotion as she spoke about her brother Michael. She told the colonel about Michael's dream of joining the military after high school, and how he had planned to follow in Sarah's footsteps by attending the military academy. Michael had been her biggest supporter during her own journey through college and military training, always encouraging her when the challenges seemed overwhelming. Sarah's voice began to break slightly as she described the car accident that took Michael's life just weeks before he was scheduled to begin the military application process. She explained how the tattoo was her way of keeping his memory alive and honoring the military service he never had the chance to pursue. The angel wings represented her belief that Michael was watching over her military career, and the inscription reflected her promise to serve with the honor and dedication he would have shown. The communications bunker remained completely silent as Sarah shared her story. Colonel Harrison listened intently, his expression unreadable but his posture showing that he was giving her words serious consideration. The other personnel present found themselves moved by the heartfelt explanation and the obvious pain Sarah still carried from her loss. When Sarah finished speaking, Colonel Harrison was quiet for a long moment. He studied the tattoo again, this time seeing it not as a regulation violation but as a tribute to unfulfilled military service and family sacrifice. The artwork took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of Sarah's explanation. The colonel began to speak, and his words surprised everyone in the room. He told Sarah about his own experiences with loss during his military career, and how the memory of fallen comrades had shaped his approach to leadership and service. He acknowledged that while regulations were important, there were sometimes circumstances that required commanders to look beyond the letter of the law to understand the spirit of military service. Colonel Harrison explained that the memorial nature of Sarah's tattoo, combined with her exceptional performance during the communication emergency, created a unique situation that warranted special consideration. He noted that her technical expertise had quite literally saved the day and prevented a potential security crisis for the entire base. However, the colonel also made it clear that military regulations existed for important reasons and could not be ignored simply because of personal circumstances. He needed to find a solution that respected both Sarah's sacrifice and the military's standards for appearance and discipline. After another long pause, Colonel Harrison announced his decision. Sarah would receive an official commendation for her exceptional technical service during the communication emergency. The tattoo situation would be handled through administrative channels rather than disciplinary action. with the goal of finding a permanent solution that honored both military regulations and the memorial's significance. The colonel also announced that he would be recommending Sarah for accelerated promotion consideration based on her technical skills and dedication to duty. Her actions during the emergency had demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and expertise the military needed to develop and retain. As the tension in the communications bunker finally began to ease, Sarah felt overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. She had expected the worst possible outcome, but instead found herself receiving recognition for her service and understanding for her personal loss. The colonel's decision showed that military leadership could be both firm and compassionate when circumstances warranted such consideration. In the weeks following the communication crisis, Colonel Harrison worked closely with military personnel offices to develop a formal policy regarding memorial tattoos. Sarah's situation had highlighted a gap in existing regulations that failed to account for meaningful tributes to fallen family members who had military connections or aspirations. The new policy, which became known throughout the military as the Martinez Protocol, in honor of Sarah's brother, established clear guidelines for evaluating memorial tattoos on a case-by-case basis. The protocol required documentation of the person being memorialized, evidence of their military connection or service aspirations, and approval from commanding officers based on the tattoo's appropriateness and the service member's overall performance record. Sarah received official approval to maintain her memorial tattoo, along with documentation that would prevent future commanders from questioning its presence. She also received her promotion ahead of schedule, recognizing both her technical expertise and her dedication to military service under challenging circumstances. The story of Sarah's tattoo and Colonel Harrison's compassionate response spread throughout Fort Braxton and eventually to other military installations. Many service members who had been hiding their own memorial tattoos came forward to seek approval under the new protocol. The policy helped countless soldiers honor lost family members while maintaining their military careers. Sarah's relationship with Colonel Harrison evolved into one of mutual respect and professional mentorship. The colonel began including her in advanced technical planning sessions and recommended her for specialized training programs that would further develop her cybersecurity expertise. He recognized that her combination of technical skills and personal resilience made her an ideal candidate for leadership roles. The communication systems that Sarah had repaired became a symbol of her technical excellence throughout the base. She continued to volunteer for the most challenging assignments and earned a reputation as the soldier who could solve problems that others considered impossible. Her dedication to her work honored both her military service and her brother's memory. Colonel Harrison's decision to show compassion while maintaining military standards earned him recognition from higher command levels. His approach to Sarah's situation became a case study in military leadership programs, demonstrating how commanders could balance regulation enforcement with understanding of individual circumstances. Sarah used her experience to become an advocate for other soldiers facing personal challenges while serving their country. She volunteered to counsel service members who were struggling with loss, family problems, or other issues that could affect their military performance. Her story showed that personal struggles could coexist with outstanding military service when properly supported. The memorial tattoo that had once been a source of anxiety became a symbol of pride for Sarah. She no longer needed to hide her tribute to Michael, and she found that sharing his story helped other soldiers who had experienced similar losses. The angel wings on her shoulder served as a reminder that military service often involves personal sacrifice from entire families. Years later, Sarah achieved her goal of becoming an officer and specializing in cybersecurity. She returned to Fort Braxton as a captain, working under Colonel Harrison's continued mentorship to protect military communications from increasingly sophisticated threats. Her technical expertise, combined with her understanding of military culture and individual needs, made her an exceptional leader. The communication bunker where Sarah's secret had been revealed became a special place for her. Every time she worked in that facility, she remembered the day when her carefully hidden memorial was exposed, and how one commander's wisdom and compassion had changed not only her career but military policy for countless other service members. Sarah's story demonstrated that true military strength comes not just from following regulations, but from understanding the human experiences that drive people to serve their country. Her brother Michael never had the chance to wear a military uniform, but through Sarah's service and the policy changes that resulted from her experience, his memory became part of military history. The memorial tattoo remained visible on Sarah's shoulder throughout her distinguished military career, serving as a permanent reminder that service to country often involves honoring those who inspired us to serve, even when they could not serve themselves. Sarah's dedication to both her brother's memory and her military duties showed that personal meaning and professional excellence could work together to create something greater than either could achieve alone.